Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Chapter 5, verses 11 to 20. Kayena manasa buddhya kevalairindriyairapi yoginah karma kurvanti sangham tyaktvatma shuddhaye yuktah karma phalam tyaktva shantimapnoti naishtikim ayuktah kamakarena phale sakto nibadhyate sarvakarmani manasa sanyasyaste sukham vashi navadvare pure dehi naiva kurvanna karayan na kartrutvam na karmani lokasya srujati prabhuhu na karma phala sanyogam स्वभावस्तु प्रवर्तते नादत्ते कस्यचित् पापं न चैव सुकृतं विभुः अज्ञानेनावृतं ज्ञानं तेन मुह्यन्ति जन्तवः ज्ञानेन तु तदज्ञानम् येषां नाश्रितमात्मनः तेषामादित्यवज्ञानं प्रकाशयति तत्परम् तद्बुद्धयस्तदात्मानः तन्निष्ठास्तत्परायणाः गच्छन्त्य पुनरावृत्तिम् ज्ञाननिर्धूतकल्मषाः विद्या विनय संपन्ने ब्राह्मणे गविहस्तिनि शुनि चैव श्वपाके च पंडिताः समदर्शिनः इहैव तैर्जितः सर्गः येषां साम्ये स्थितं मनः निर्दोषं हि समं ब्रह्म तस्माद् ब्रह्मणि ते स्थिताः न प्रहृष्येत् प्रियं प्राप्य नो द्विजेत् प्राप्य चाप्रियं स्थिरबुद्धिरसम्मूढः ब्रह्मविद् ब्रह्मणि स्थितः. Hari Om and Namaskaram to everyone. Hari Om. In the 13th verse, he portrays the the self as the omnipresent, as if seated in the city of nine gates. In the 14th verse, he presents him as the Lord, Prabhu. Prabhu means the Lord. The 13th verse, he portrays him as someone who is confined within the body, Dehi, in the body. In the 14th verse, he says he is the Lord, the primeval source. And in the 15th verse, we're going to see now, soon, he portrays him as the Vibhuhu. Vibhuhu means that which is the omnipresent, the all-pervading reality. Now, in the 14th verse, just a quick recap, he said the Lord, Vibhuhu, the Lord neither creates doership nor action. So there is the Lord, the Atman, the immaculate self, the truth, does not perform any karma, no action. Nor the doership, nor karta. It is not the actor. Karma phala sanyogam. Nor any union with the fruit of action. The Atman has got nothing to do with the action, nor the doership, nor the fruits or the labors of your action. He says the Atman has got nothing to do with all this. But svabhavastu pravartate. Svabhava is the nature, means the vasanas of each individual that draws you to a particular field of activity. It is your own svabhava, it is your own swadharma, it is your own gunas, it is your own vasanas that is responsible for all your actions. Atman has got nothing to do with it. You've got to be very, very clear and sound with this understanding. God has got nothing to do with the creation. God has got nothing to do with all that you're doing. As we have learned, it is ignorance of the self that creates the entire pluralistic phenomenon. It's nothing to do with the reality. So he clearly brings about that separation, that segregation. So in the third chapter, if I'm not wrong, where there he says that you got to understand every human being as an expression of his or her own vasanas. Guneshu vartanti. Iti matva na sajjate. Na sajjate means you are not affected, you don't get perturbed, you don't get involved. If you understand it as their gunas, their vasanas. Somebody has tamasic gunas, they will behave in a tamasic manner. Somebody has rajasic gunas, they will behave rajasically. Somebody has business vasanas, they will behave, they will be a businessman. So it is the vasanas and the gunas. Now the differentiation between vasanas and gunas are, vasanas only take you to the field of activity. The gunas is the modus operandi in the field of activity. They're two different things. Vasanas only gives you the field. What you do depends on your vasanas. You are an architect because of your vasanas. You are an engineer because of your vasanas. You are a doctor because you have vasanas to do medicine. You want to gamble. Whatever you want to do. You're a butcher, you're a carpenter, you're a singer, you're a philosopher. Everything is defined by your own vasanas. Vasanas only gives you the field. Now, how you function in the field, how you operate in the field is determined by the state of your mind, by your gunas. Whether you're functioning sattvically or rajasic or tamasic. That depends on your gunas. So what changes in one's life is the proportion of these gunas. The vasanas are that really don't change, because that is the spine of your personality. Your spine doesn't change. That's the backbone of your personality. That defines your personality. That doesn't change. So whatever you are born with invariably remains through the course of your life. So what we got to understand is, you got to learn to put on this specs. You want to gain this vision that everybody is operating, see through the lens of vasanas and gunas. So one is vasanas, others are gunas. So when you understand each one as their vasanas or gunas, you will come to terms that they are helplessly functioning according to their nature, which is svabhava. So the complete understanding of svabhava is vasanas and gunas. So don't, not just vasanas, please. Because the person may have the same vasanas, but the gunas have changed, has changed, will change. Now, I have been in this field for a long time, for a fair time. But what has changed is not the field of activity, isn't it? I've been doing the same thing. But what has changed is what I bring, what gunas I bring to the floor. That changes. Okay, so, and furthermore, you got to understand the vasanas and the gunas have got nothing to do with the Atman, the self. The self has got nothing to do with the actions, nor the doership, nor karma phala. So you can't go and ask, pray to God. Now, what has prayer to God got to do anything with your vasanas or your actions or the karma phala? God will say, I have got nothing to do with man. Mind your own business, he's saying. MYOB. Language, communication problem between God and us. So we continue to keep praying, thinking that he will someday listen to us. And if something good happens to you, attribute that good to him, thinking that he has answered your prayers. God has got nothing to do with it. If you still are doubtful and don't trust what I'm saying, the next verse seals it. Yeah? If you think this fellow is imagining something, he is bringing in his own interpretation to it, all that doubt will disappear. The next verse, he seals it. All right, let's take up verse 15. Nadatte kasyachit papam na chaiva sukrutam vibhuhu ajnanenavritam jnanam tena muhyanti jantavaha. Nadatte kasyachit papam na chaiva sukrutam vibhuhu ajnanenavritam jnanam tena muhyanti jantavaha. Na adatte kasyachit. The Lord neither takes what? Papam, which is sin, or sukrutam, or virtue of anyone. The God is not interested in all the sin nor even the virtue. Ajnane avritam jnanam. Ajnanena, enveloped, avritam. Knowledge is enveloped by ignorance. Because of that, you're all fellows deluded, man. Muhyanti, deluded. Jantava, all you fellows are deluded because of knowledge is enveloped by ignorance. Ajnanena avritam jnanam. It can't be any more clearly spelt. I don't understand that why people can't understand. That I don't understand. So I can't understand that why people can't see this. Vibhuhu, as I've said, from Dehi, he comes to Prabhuhu to Vibhuhu. The last word in the very first line, at the end of it, he says, Vibhuhu means the omnipresent Lord. So the way he builds the thought from 13 to 15 is beautiful. He just magnifies it. He just takes it to a different level. So that which confined within the city of 9 gates, as I said in the 13th verse, and then he says it's got nothing to do with your actions, man, nor the doer, nor the fruit of an individual. And then he says, it has got nothing to do with all the good and the bad of all beings. God has got nothing to do with it. Now, what's the best way to understand this is, okay, the moment I talk of, let me ask you all, the moment I talk of sin and virtue, what do you understand? What comes to your mind the moment I say sin and virtue? Huh? Yeah, Srinivas Garu, Chippan sir.
Namaskar, Guruji.
Namaskar.
Sin, the moment it comes, sin is something wrong, virtue is something is good.
Sin and virtue, wrong and right. Yeah, but that could be from a very basic interpretation, a very layman's perspective to say sin, right and wrong, good and bad.
Right.
Now, can you go little beyond that? And because keep in mind, he's saying the Lord has got nothing to do with the sin and virtue. So with reference to it, so the question has a deeper connotation. So the moment I say sin and virtue, what are we talking about? You got to think afresh. You got to think independently. And that's what I'm trying to encourage or facilitate here. As a flash, I can give the answer and then you will not know what we are getting at. But by putting you through this process of exercising and questioning, the process helps you through a journey which you have not explored. You're not being, many teachers don't do this. I'm not saying we're doing anything extraordinary, but I'm saying it is a very beautiful methodology to draw it out, to make you think. Especially in a platform like this, with the background of this knowledge, it's very rare. Many people explain the truth, they don't teach the truth. So again, coming back to the question, the moment you talk about sin and virtue, what do you understand with reference to the context where he says the Lord accepts neither the sin nor virtue? Yeah, Tinkima?
So when we do an action and later we regret or feel guilty about it or think I shouldn't have behaved like this, it was wrong of me to do it or say it or not do it or not say it, then that becomes a sin for me. That's my understanding.
Could you come again? I'm sorry.
So if I do something, whether it's an action or I say something, maybe even a thought, and at that moment, if it is done or said, and later I keep revisiting it and thinking, no, I feel guilty, or my conscience pricks me, or I think, no, that was wrong, I should not have done that. But at the moment I did it, at that moment, my intellect was probably not working. So for that action which disturbs me and my peace of mind, then that is a sin for me.
Yeah. No, you're perfectly right in the understanding of your concept of sin. But just to clarify, Ma, I'm not asking what is the definition of sin. My question is, what comes to your mind when we talk about sin and virtue in the context of the Lord accepts neither sin nor virtue? So you got to understand the context. It's always important. I'm not asking how do you define sin, and it's a straightforward point I take completely. You get it.
So in that case, then the Lord has nothing to do. That means whether our action is sinful or virtuous, we are neither punished nor rewarded by the Lord. It is that action itself that will punish or reward us. The Lord has nothing to do with the consequences of that action, sinful or virtuous.
All right. That's a straightforward interpretation of the statement. Yes, you're right. I'll give you, I don't know how many points I can give you, but I'll give you certain points there. But I'll not give you the points because you didn't read my mind, what I'm getting at.
Okay.
No, no, which is too much to expect, I suppose, isn't it?
Still babies, nursery class.
No, 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 no. We all are somewhere in the journey. Now, yes. Anybody else? Yes, Subramanian Garu.
Hari Om Guruji.
Hari Om, sir. Hari Om.
Guruji, you have beautifully taken us from verse 13 to 14 to 15, in which the Lord in verse 13 is the Dehi, then the Prabhu and Vibhu. You explained that also.
Yes.
The indweller, the Lord, and now the all-pervading, all-omniscient Lord. When that is so, he neither takes part in takes responsibility of the sin or the virtue. I would venture to suggest is it is not he who is getting that thought. Sin, as you earlier explained to us, is just not the act but the tendency, the very thought, the very way we think about that. Even the thought in the mind becomes sinful. So sinful virtues and all that. So he is not the one who has planted those virtuous thoughts or sinful thoughts which might lead to the consequences as they are. So in that sense, he is just there. And he is not the one who has, I feel that since he is not, he is all pervading and he is just there as a witness. And I am what I am because of my vasanas and also the gunas progressing as per my gunas, as you mentioned at the outset today. Here is the Lord who does not take part in my sin or virtue, means he is not the one who gave me the idea to act sinfully or virtuously. He is just there. What I did was because of the vasanas, what I continue to do because of the gunas.
Right. Now, very, very clearly explained, very clearly captured. But you are still going back to the 14th verse where we say it is the swabhava. The Lord doesn't do the act, nor doership, nor fruit. Don't you think, Ji? So when you clarify what you said, you're still falling back on
14, yeah.
14, and though you say that has got nothing to do with sin and virtue. No, it's 10% points. I agree completely what you're saying. See, but just to give you the next step, the next level or the next stage of thinking. See, the moment you talk of sin and virtue are to be understood as a pair of opposite. Sin is bad, virtue is good. So good and bad is nothing but a pair of opposite. So when you say a pair of opposite, what do you understand by a pair of opposite? What does a pair of opposite or pairs of opposites? Short and tall, brilliant and dull, happy and morose, good and bad, rich and poor, birth and death, gross and subtle. These are all the opposites, the pairs of opposites. So the moment you say pairs of opposites, what do you understand? Jama? What do you understand the moment you say pairs of opposites?
The pairs of opposites, Guruji, Hari Om, the pairs of opposites belong to the terrestrial world and not to the transcendental.
Correct. So the The pairs of opposites means the terrestrial world. Now, can you read that sentence, Jama? Why are you switching off your microphone? Still with you. Now you read the sentence replacing the word sin and virtue with the pairs of opposites with the world. What does the statement read? Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Neither takes the sin nor even the virtue of anyone,
Yeah. No.
because this belongs to the terrestrial world. The transcendental has got nothing to do with the terrestrial world.
Stop. That's all. The transcendental reality has got nothing to do with the terrestrial world. This is what you got to understand. Brahman has got nothing to do with the world, because the world is a product of ignorance of the self. The world is a creation of avidya. Vidya has got nothing to do with avidya. The self has got nothing to do with the world at large. So by using the word virtue and sin, you understand the world as dvandvas. The Sanskrit word for pairs of opposites is, Hariji, could you please capture it? Dvandvas. Dvandva is D-V-A-N. Dvandva. D-V-A-N-D-V-A. Correct? Dvandva means opposite. Dvandvas means the pairs of opposites. So everything in the world is only understood with an opposite. So the pairs of opposites means the world. So in essence, he's saying the Lord has got nothing to do with the world. He's got nothing to do with it. The Lord has got nothing to do with your love and hatred also. You may love or you may hate. He has got nothing to do with it. Hariji, you may say, I hate all of you. Also you can say, but Lord has got nothing to do with your love and hatred. We will have a lot to do with your love, but not Brahman. Atman is pure and immaculate. He has got nothing to do with it. Just like the petrol has got nothing to do with the car meets with an accident or it reaches destination safely. Has it got anything to do with it? It has got nothing to do with it. Electricity has got nothing to do with heat and cold. Isn't it? When you go into a theater, watch a movie, there's a huge conflagration. One scene, the entire forest is being burnt. So there's flames. Is the screen burnt by the flames on the screen? Why not? Interesting, isn't it? It is just a projection. The next scene, there's torrential flow, heavy downpour. Not an inch of the screen gets wet. Yet there's so much of water. As the famous words of, who is that, Harishji? Water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. Water, water everywhere.
Hemingway.
Sorry?
Ernest Hemingway.
Ernest Hemingway. Water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. Water, water everywhere, all the ships to shrink. Isn't it? So with all the water, it has no effect on the screen. Why? The screen has got nothing to do with either the conflagration or the floods. Therefore, in that spirit, you must understand the Lord neither accepts your virtue or sin. Means neither you may understand, sir, yes, sinful actions will not take me to the self, but all of us, or if not all, most of us here would believe that virtuous deeds will take me to the self, isn't it? Now here gives us a blow to all of us, a punch he gives us. that all your virtuous deed also God has got nothing to do with it. You may be saying, sir, I'm doing all the virtuous deeds in the name of the Lord. And here the Lord is saying, I have got nothing to do with your virtue. And sir, what kind of God is Lord Krishna talking about? Which God is he? I have never known of this God till now in my life. I'm doing all the virtue in the name of the Lord. And yet the Lord says, I have got nothing to do with your virtue. How do you understand this? How should you understand this? It's very important you understand. Again, another aspect to it. One interpretation is, we said, virtue and vice means the opposites. It's got nothing to do with the transcendental, has got nothing to do with the terrestrial. One interpretation. Then secondly, there's so much to it. Read through the words. That's what I'm trying to say. So the moment, and second interpretation is, the moment you say virtue and vice, we understand sinful actions don't take me to the higher, perhaps they take me to hell. Yes, sir, I understand. I thought so, Hariji. It was Samuel Coleridge.
It is Samuel Taylor Coleridge.
Yeah. In the poem?
The rhyme of the Ancient Mariner.
The Ancient Mariner, yes, Samuel Coleridge. As you said that, and I said that, I said something is not right, but I didn't want to say no to it because I didn't know a certainty. Thanks for the clarification. Samuel Coleridge, in the poem The Ancient Mariner, he says there, water, water everywhere, and so on. So coming back to it, you understand that sin is accrued when you perform acts of selfishness. When you perform wrong deeds, you get demerit, papam, which you may call it as hell. Yes, sir, hell has got nothing to do with the Lord. But I thought all the meritorious deeds, all the good, all the sacrifices, all the unselfish work you do, which gives you punya, which gives you the heavenly state, which gives you virtue, at least that should have something to do with the higher, isn't it? But how is it Lord says it's got nothing to do with either sin or virtue? Sin I understand, but the small clarification with reference to virtue. How should you understand it? Rajima, Teriyama.
Guruji, from the infinite standpoint, the finite does not exist. Would that be?
No, Muhammad Ali Panch Maji சொன்னீங்க நீங்க அது? No, from the infinite standpoint, finite doesn't exist is, we are not talking in that absolute context. We're talking from a relative standpoint. When we say that sinful deeds don't take me to the self-understandable, you don't evolve spiritually by doing selfish deeds. But you and I believe that unselfish deeds will take you to greater spiritual heights. Correct?
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't rhyme, it doesn't gel with the verse. Am I right?
Does it increase the sattvic guna in us, Guruji, which is closer to the self, which takes you closer to the self? Are we?
No.
No.
Can you? No, it's a very important aspect that you think along with the speaker. Now, am I talking of gunas now?
No, Guruji.
What am I talking about? I'm talking about vice and virtue, sin and virtue, isn't it?
Yes, Guruji.
It is easy to accept that the Lord has got nothing to do with the sin. Acceptable. It's quite reasonable to accept that. But when you say the Lord has got nothing to do with your virtue or the merit is accrued when you perform meritorious deeds, unselfish deeds, sacrificial deeds, when you want to embrace the good of others. Now he says Lord has got nothing to do with your virtue also. Can you make sense of that statement?
He is only a Sakshi, Guruji. Would that make sense? The self is the Sakshi, as a witness. is unaffected by virtue or sin?
No, ma, I'm not talking of the self being unaffected. Second interpretation we're giving is your unselfish actions will not take you to the self.
Hmm.
Are you thinking along with me? There should be no pressure in trying to answer this. Just try to understand the concept here. We are saying unselfish actions don't take you to the self. It has got nothing to do with it.
Hmm.
So if I have to get to the self, I can't take the route of
Unselfish actions.
selfish. I can't even take this route of unselfish.
Hmm.
Oh my God. It just baffles us. It just alerts us. It just wakes us up. I'm only trying to convey that something which is not there, yet it is there. Solungo.
It is only discovering the self within the self, Guruji.
Sorry. I got no issues. Anybody else? Gayatri Ma?
Guruji, my understanding will be that punya is also an opposite of papa. So you are once again bringing the dualities Dvanda and bringing him down to the terrestrial world. So when he is above the terrestrial world, we can't. Punya is again a opposite of papa. This is my understanding.
Okay. Yeah. You got a point there. All right. I wouldn't want to comment anything now. You don't go. Let me hear from others. Yeah, Hariji, you wanted to say something?
No action, whether it is sin or punya or papa, will take us to the self. The knowledge alone will take us to the self.
நீங்க ஒரு level high போயிட்டீங்க. We are talking of action. You are saying no action will take you.
Yeah, whether it is sin, punya or papa, because they are all in the level of action. That is in the terrestrial level. When we are talking about the self, we are talking about the transcendental level.
Okay. You're not wrong if you argue in that point as well, or that argument is not wrong. Fair enough, but I'm still open. Yeah, Subramanian garu, cheppandi.
Guruji, I would say, talking only of the virtue also might lead me to Sarga, that is all. This world, Naraka, Swarga, or this world, what is the present world, these are all terrestrial only. And Shine Punya, we can come back to this world again. So this is what ultimately it is. The Lord is beyond all this. Transcendental means transcending all these levels, which include the Swarga also. So that being the case, it might take me there, get me back here. And as Hariji said, knowledge alone is the way. So that being that, the Lord doesn't take part in the virtues also. That's my little understanding, Guruji. Hari Om.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Point well noted, sir. Anybody else? Tinkima, you wanted to say something?
I've just put a note in the chat box.
What did you? Okay, sorry.
So one is, of course, that it's beyond, it's transcendental. So this is all terrestrial, what we're talking about. So here I have one doubt, which I'll come to later. So not unselfish is sinful act. So, okay, hell, whatever that is, projection of the mind. And unselfish also, okay, was not acceptable. So selfless action, that is as an obligation, yajna, whatever. So we just keep doing that as a stepping stone on the path without thinking of the fruit, that where is it going to take, though it will take. We're not thinking that now I'm one step closer, but it has to become, I would say, a way of life where without thinking, where is this taking me? I should just do it because that becomes my, natural way of doing or being. I don't know. But that again is relating to the terrestrial because the world is only a projection. So
You've got a point. In fact, what Subramaniam ji and what you have said actually seals the answer. This is what I was looking at. See, okay, yeah. Sudhakar garu, Cheppan sir.
To my understanding, God is totally neutral,
Ah.
and only by realization of ourself will reach the ultimate. But to realize ourselves, knowledge is essential, and knowledge comes out of experience. And through this process, I think we will be able to achieve the self-realization. I would say the ultimate. That is what is my understanding.
Okay, all right, okay. See, as I've just clarified that the couple of points made, there are three types of actions a human being can perform: selfish, unselfish, and selfless. Selfish action is an action performed with a selfish desire. And selfish desire, when you perform an action, two consequences come. The two fruits of that selfish action. One fruit of the selfish action is that selfish action creates an immediate consequence, which is demerit, which is papam. You go through a hell of an experience. The second consequence of a selfish action is it creates more selfish desires. It creates new impressions of that same desire because you are desire prompted. You are acting on a desire. All right. Selfish action creates papam and more selfish impressions. So you will perform more such actions. So it's a vicious cycle. You get caught up in that whirlpool of selfish actions, facing the consequences of those actions. And since you have sown seed for more such actions, you get caught up in that cycle of fruit, action fruit of the selfish realm. And there are people who perform unselfish actions. Now, unselfish actions also are actions performed with a desire. You have a desire to serve, you have a desire to do, you have a desire to help, you have a desire to sacrifice. So there's a desire. Because the desire is pure and unselfish, you get what is known as punya. For selfish, you get papam. For unselfish, you get punya. Now, the second consequence of an unselfish action is, what is the second consequence? Srinivas Garu, are you with me?
Yeah, when we're talking about the unselfish desire to do, there's the one.
Correct.
And second is punyam.
No. So when you perform unselfish action, one is you get punya.
Punya, yeah.
Second, what do you get? Okay, have you captured selfish?
Yes.
Okay, what did you capture? What are the two things when you perform actions with the selfish desire?
When we get the papam.
One is papam. Second is?
And the more selfish desires.
Correct. Now apply the same principle to unselfish. When you perform unselfish actions, what do you get?
Okay, so more unselfish desires.
One is you get punya, other is you create more unselfish desires. Now, when you take this understanding, state of Brahman or reality of the self is mentioned or is said to be a state of desirelessness. The state of the reality is a state of no desires, no vasanas. If that is the goal, and if I am performing unselfish deeds, what am I creating? Am I not accumulating more unselfish desires? So the more desires I have, is it not binding me still to the world? Therefore, I am not going anywhere near the self. So what takes me to the self is selfless actions. Selfless actions are desireless actions, where when you perform desireless actions, you don't get merit or demerit, point one.
Right.
Second point, it does not create new desires. Point two. Point three, it gets rid of existing desires. The three consequences when you perform actions with the selfless actions, which are desireless actions, or said to be as motiveless actions. The three thing is, you don't get punya or papa, so you're not bound to the fruits of action. The second is, it gets rid of existing desires. Thirdly, it doesn't create new desires. It's like a fuel is burnt. It's being consumed because you're acting selflessly. So what happens? The fuel gets burned, the vasanas are getting reduced, and that is when you get closer to the self. Only such actions take you to the God, to the Lord, but any action performed with a desire, whether be good or bad, the Lord has got nothing to do with it. Means you will not get anywhere close to the self. You will not spiritually evolve. Sir, whether I carry 100 kgs of rock on my back or I carry 100 kgs of silver on my back, it is still a burden on my back, isn't it? It is a rock or blocks of silver, it is still load for me. If you say silver is like unselfish thoughts, pure thoughts, mere rock and rubble is gross, selfish thoughts, it's still a burden. It's going to weigh you down. You can't be upright. It's a burden. It's going to pin you down. So you must learn to do what your obligations are, what you ought to do. Don't get caught up in this motives and desires. It's very easy to talk. I'm saying it's very easy to explain, but it's a totally different ball game. It demands a lot of wisdom, a lot of understanding, a lot of conviction. It needs a lot to be able to perform action without desire. It is difficult, in fact, to be unselfish. Not to be selfless is a one notch higher. At least you got to understand it. Therefore, in fact, there is a verse in the Bhajagovindam. It says, Punya apunya vivarjita pantaha. Isn't it? Correct, Rajima? Which verse is it, you recall? Hariji, Solungo, which verse is it? Any idea?
I don't remember the words, the which number, but yes, the concept, yes, I do remember.
So I'm not able to get to the exact verse, but the very words are punya, apunya, vivarjita pantaha. Yeah, Hariji, you wanted to say something?
Yes. Guruji, when we are talking about selfless action, is it possible, if you allow me to use that term, at all possible for a yogi or a bhogi to act, to make selfless action? Yes, the jnani can make, that is That we have learned. When we are talking people at my level, will I be at all in a position to act, to do selfless action?
See, theoretically, it's very much possible.
Yeah.
If it's not possible, then it is not, there's no discussion about it.
If I keep on raising my level,
Yes.
at my relative level, I was or I am a bogi, and I keep on raising my level at which I am, level of thought at which I am pegging. It was at level X, then I do my sadhana, then my level goes to X plus plus it is going. Then from yogi level, from bhogi level, I get into unselfish to selfless, unselfish action. That I get into the yogi level. And when I reach at the peak of yogi level, where my desire is still 19.99999%, till that time, I am going to be only at a yogi level. And if I have to act selflessly, can I, as a yogi, even a evolved yogi, can I make selfless action? Or should I cross that bar, pole vault? I have to leave it and then come jump to the other side. Will it not be at that level? Will I not be at the level of a jnani?
Now, not sticking to the technical terms, whether you call a seeker as a yogi or a jnani, you must understand what makes an action selfish, unselfish, and selfless. What's the difference? Selfish actions where there is no goal or a purpose. When a person has no higher objective in life, when your thoughts and attention are only on your own limited ego individual, your actions are selfish and self-centered. Such actions are called purposeless lives. And there are plenty of people out there in the world has no purpose in life. All their life is driven to that the world must reward them.
Getting.
No, yeah, bhoga, not in the sense of even indulging. All their attention is themselves and the world must behave according to me.
Yeah, taking.
And I am the master and everything must behave according to my tunes. So selfish, self-centered, purposeless lives. All the time you're only interested in the shortcomings of others. They are non-spiritual.
Yeah, complaining always.
All the time shortcomings of others, complaining. Then comes yoga. When you have a goal in life, a goal means it has to be beyond your own egoistic, personal, self-centered interest. So if I want to perform unselfish, the first thing I got to do is I must stop thinking about myself. If I want to do any good to you all, if I want to serve the community, my first goal is I must stop thinking of myself, replace thought of I and my with the thought of others. Is it not? If I have no interest of your welfare, how can I serve you all? Is it possible for me to serve you all? Impossible. So to the extent I serve you all, to that extent I am not thinking of myself.
To that extent.
I'm not thinking of myself. So there is a goal. Now the goal is beyond your selfish interest. Now and that can be relative. Okay, there are various goals. The goals are very relative in nature. All right. So as long as you have a goal beyond your selfish interest, you can start thinking of only your family. Even your family also is a goal because it's beyond yourself. The head of the family goes through great sacrifice, great pain, works hard to give the best to his family. That also is a goal, but a very limited goal. It's like a small boundary you have drawn around your own family. You can't think beyond your family. That's a very limited goal, but still it's a goal. Now, your unselfish goals also can be very lofty. You want to serve.
Loka samasta sukhino.
Yes, you want to serve entire humanity. That was the goal. Now, for selfless actions, there's only one goal. That goal is self-realization. Only when you conceive a goal of self-realization, then alone you can perform selfless actions. Because you understand that nothing in the world has got anything to do with the self. So you will be disinterested in everything that's happening here. So your only interest is to get to the self. Since your desire to get to the self is paramount, there is no other desire with reference to the world. Therefore, it's called selfless, desireless, motiveless. So the only way you understand the difference between selfish, unselfish, and selfless. Selfish is when your thoughts are revolving around your own ego and your limited self. Unselfish is serving a limited cause, means something beyond your limited interest. But again, you can't go beyond your identification. It's unselfish. Selfless is only desire for self-realization. Anything other than self-realization, you have a motive. So whether it is possible for you or me to perform selfless action, it depends on what goal you have envisioned to yourself. Are you able to conceive the goal of self-realization? If you can, then your actions are, to that extent, they are selfless. To that extent. It's proportionate. But then to the extent you're not having that selflessness, you will get caught up in unselfish, you will caught up in the cycle of selfish. But the verse clearly says, the Lord has got nothing to do with either vice or virtue. So you should choose what? To act without a motive. Try to perform actions without a desire. Means try to do what your obligations are. Means don't get involved. Slowly start withdrawing from the objectivity. Withdraw from the desire, withdraw from the motive. Just do what you are bound to do. See, it's very much possible that the very act I'm doing can be a selfless action. You would not know. Some may say, oh, he has a motive when he's talking. Some may portray it, it is possible that this action can be extremely selfish. This very action is possible, it can be unselfish. This very action can be selfless. It depends on what's in my mind, what's that drives me into action. Isn't it? Okay, Hariji. Right. Now, so the Rajima has got the reference. Thanks, Ma. It's in the 22nd verse of Bhajagovindam, where he says, Ratyacharpata virachita kanthaha punya punyavi varjita panthaha yogi yogani yojita chetto ramate balon mattavadeva. Where he says, in the 22nd verse, he says, the sage who wears a shawl made of street rags, whose path is beyond the merit and demerit, whose mind is established in yoga, such a man revels in God consciousness like a child, like a madman. So we're only taking that context of the verse where his mind is established in the yoga, in the self, union with the self. He's only interested in that. Then his path is beyond the punya and apunya. And the classic example to convey beyond the good and the evil is, what's the classic example used in the context to convey? In the context. We all have gone through the Bhajagovindam as well. So you should be able to clarify. Harish ji, can you recall the example given in the context to convey the path beyond the good and the bad? Gayatri Ma, the path beyond the good and the bad. Gayatri Ma, please. Yeah, now you can.
Best example in the same words he has given, like a child, like a madman.
No, the reference of the child and the madman is different. There's a different context there, though. See, the path beyond the punya and the papa, where was the Gita of knowledge transacted?
Yogaratova, Bogaratova.
Now, please mute Gayatri Ma. Ilama.
In
Rajima.
the field between the two armies.
Senayor Bhayor Madhye. Isn't it? In between the two armies. Why in between two armies?
One represents the Kauravas represent the 100 vices and the Pandavas represent the 5 qualities or virtues that we have.
So the god.
Battle between them.
Yeah. So one is vice, other is virtue. And the knowledge of the self was transacted in between the two armies. Senayor Ubhayor Madhye. In between the two armies, the knowledge of the self was the communication, the transaction happened in between the two armies. Symbolically saying the same thing. Punya, apunya, vivarjita pantaha. The Lord has got nothing to do with vice or virtue. Nadatte kasyachit papam nachaiva sukrutam vibhuhu. Oh my God, it is put in their own contemporary thought and language. You will have to do a lot of abhyasa to be able to read in between the lines and see a connection, how it's all, everything is saying the same thing. You must have the eyes to see. And once you see it, yah pashyati sa pashyati, he who sees it, sees it. But here he says, knowledge is veiled by ignorance. Ajnanena avritam jnanam. The jnanam, the knowledge is avritam. It is covered by ajnana, as a result of which beings are deluded. They are totally deluded. I think there was a question which was posed a little earlier. I just missed it. Rajima, can you just see, there was a question asked by someone. Keshav Reddy Garu is asking. Are you there, sir? Where are you? Keshav Reddy Garu is asking, how do you relate the instance of Bhakta Prahallada and Lord Narasimha Swami? What is the context you're asking that question? I'm sorry.
Sir, here the merits, I mean, the God is not bothered or is not concerned about the merits and demerits. Here the bhakti of Bhakta Prahlada was considered as a great merit, and the God came to his rescue whenever there was a problem for him. So I just wanted a clarification in this connection.
Now, how do you say when Bhakta Prahlada wanted the Lord, he didn't know that the Lord would appear in the form of Narasimha. He just wanted salvation, isn't it? He just kept chanting the word Narayana, Narayana, isn't it?
True, sir.
So the thought in the mind of Prahlada was only salvation. He wanted to know what that God is, what liberation is. He wanted only the salvation. How can you say that desire to know God as virtuous?
If it is not virtuous, then what will you call it?
what we have all the while been trying to say.
That is jnanam. That is jnanam.
It is that you can call it jnanam, or you can call it something which transcends the virtue and vice.
Right, sir.
It is selfless.
Right.
So the desire for self can't be categorized under selfish or unselfish desire. It is termed selfless desire.
Okay, sir. Thank
So
you, sir.
in fact, the example you're given can be used to say that here's an individual or the objectifying the concept of what it is to seek God. He was not interested in anything else, isn't it?
Yes, that's true, sir.
Right?
That's
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Most,
Guruji. Hari Om.
most welcome, sir. Hari Om, Hari Om. Sorry, I missed. I saw there was a question, but then I couldn't clarify it. Okay.
But I'm happy that you finally cite Guruji.
No. I remember it. They just passed by the discussion, but glad I could come back to it.
I'm happy.
Right, sir. Most welcome.
My doubt is clarified.
Yes, sir. Most welcome. So the second half, he says, even though the perception is very vivid, our perception of the world is solid and clear. In spite of our vivid perceptions of the world, he says, all your perception is shrouded in ignorance, he says. Avritam is covered in ignorance, is veiled by ignorance. The Lord is everywhere, and yet because we are ignorant, we don't see it. What a pity. It's like a blind man standing in the midday sun. He feels the heat that is piercing his skin, but he sees no light. He's in total darkness. So he says the Lord omnipresence is there everywhere, but we don't understand. In fact, take a particular note of this section of the verses 13, 14, and 15. It's indeed very, very beautiful. So you can go back to it, try to capture it by writing down your own notes from what you have heard. If you missed it, go back, fall back on the recordings. You'll have access to it. Take notes of it. It is that exercise that helps you to capture the takeaways, and then you will get your understanding clarified. And that's your sadhana. It will indeed help you to gain clarity of what these concepts are. All right? 16. Jnanena tu tadajnanam yesham nashitamatmanah tesham adityavajnanam prakashayati tatparam. Jnanena tu tadajnanam yesham nashitamatmanah tesham adityavajnanam prakashayati tatparam. But in whom ignorance is destroyed by the knowledge of the self, jnanena tu, ta ajnanam, that ajnanam, nashitam, is destroyed. In them the knowledge reveals the supreme like the sun. In whom, in the previous verse he said, it is the ignorance that veils, isn't it? The knowledge is enveloped by ignorance and deluded. In this verse he says exactly the opposite. The opposite is, in whom the ignorance is destroyed by the knowledge of the self. Again, we remember we said knowledge and ignorance are antidote, opposite. You know, if you for a moment, what should come into your mind now? It's too much to ask, Guruji. What is too much? You just, something comes in your mind and you say, what should come into your mind? Are we all sitting here reading your mind or what? Now, I'm just reminded of the verse in Atma Bodha where we learned about the puff of cloud, the whiff of cloud which blocks the mighty sun, The whiff of cloud is ignorance, and how that whiff of cloud has blocked the mighty sun. And the sun is 100 times bigger than the size of the earth, and yet that whiff of cloud, what is the size of the whiff of cloud? It is just a passing breeze is enough to pass it away, to push it away. And yet the audacity of that whiff of cloud of ignorance is blocks the sun. Similarly, what is this ignorance? Is insignificant compared to the brilliance of the knowledge of the self, he says. So the example here is very, very beautiful. Even though the concept is very straightforward, that knowledge destroys ignorance. When the knowledge of the self destroys ignorance, the self reveals itself. How does it reveal? Like the sun, he says. Prakashayati tatparam. That supreme. Prakashayati. Like adityavat. Like the sun. Now, there's a simple analogy. The rest of the concept is straightforward, but we will come back to it next week again. But the simple concept, the beauty is, those of you all who are early risers, I believe most of you all are, different times of the year, but let's say now, if you were to go out by 5:30 or 5:40 or so, you will find that there is enough light out there, isn't it? By 5:45, you will find it's quite, summers it's much earlier. But now since winter is setting in, you'll find by 5:30, 5:40, you find there is enough, just enough light. By 6 o'clock, it's quite bright, isn't it? But has the sun risen? Sun has not risen yet. So there is this darkness which prevailed for that long, the denseness of darkness, which is compared to ignorance. So the denseness of darkness has gone way before the sun has come out in the horizon. You see the sun in the horizon, you see the mighty sun, but way before the sun may rise maybe at 6:45, but an hour before the sun comes in the horizon, there's enough light to dispel all the darkness. So what is it that dispels the darkness? There is someone known as the charioteer of sun god. The charioteer of sun god is known as Arunaha. So Arunaha comes way before the sun comes up. And that Arunaha is enough to dispel the dense darkness. You don't need the mighty sun to dispel the darkness. Way before you get to the sun, which is the realization, all your ignorance and darkness is dispelled and destroyed. So if you still have the expression of ignorance and darkness felt in you, that means you have not even come to the dawn. So you don't have to wait until realization for all the ignorance to be dispelled. How long to wait? Way before sunrise, way before realization, all your ignorance gets dispelled. What a beauty. What a beauty. What we are trying to say is, to dispel ignorance, it doesn't take much effort. You don't need the sun to rise to dispel. Once the sun rises, then you all have to put on shades, and then it's too bright. You can't even see that light. It's too dazzling. Brilliance. Isn't it? So you can't behold the sight or the joy or the glory of the self. But as you start progressing towards it, there's enough wisdom, there's enough knowledge to dispel all your ignorance and the effects of ignorance. Now, having said this, I will leave you all with a question. Please explain what is ignorance and its expressions. Always in the context. The context means in the spiritual context. So what do you mean? Please explain what is ignorance and its expressions. Are we all clear with the question? Because in the context I've said, as you start progressing towards the self, all the ignorance and all the consequences of that ignorance gets taken care of. And then you're only marching towards the glory of the self. So you need to know what is that ignorance and the expressions of that ignorance. It's consequences. You can say expressions or consequences of that ignorance. If you think consequence is a better word, you could use it, but so pen down your ideas. I'll help you to understand what the verse is saying. Okay.